Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, the ceasefire is over. Fighting resumes as Israel strikes Hamas targets inside Gaza. And the U.S. hits the Houthis in Yemen. And President Trump issues a stern warning to Iran. Plus, Cindy Jacobs' prophecy about big changes ahead for the Middle East. And Jerusalem's Purim parade, celebrating the survival of the Jewish people. All this and more on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Well, it's back to wartime. Early Tuesday morning, Israeli warplanes began striking Hamas targets inside Gaza. This came on the heels of the U.S. warplanes pounding of Houthi rebel targets in Yemen over the weekend. The Trump administration also warned Iran to stop funding their proxy army or suffer the consequences. Here's the latest.
Dozens of U.S. airstrikes and missile strikes on Houthi targets over the weekend in Yemen left at least 50 people dead, the rebels claim. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz says Houthi leaders are among the dead.
This was an overwhelming response that actually targeted multiple Houthi leaders and took them out.
The attacks came after the Houthis warned they're about to start hitting ships in the Red Sea and other nearby waters again. Since the start of the war in Gaza, the Houthis have disrupted global shipping and cost billions of dollars with attacks on commercial ships in the Red Sea. They've also targeted U.S. warships. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Fox News.
4 months ago, when we sent a ship through, it was shot at 17 times. Ships haven't been able to go through for over a year without being shot at. Freedom of navigation is basic. It's a core national interest.
On Truth Social, President Trump declared, "No terrorist force will stop American commercial and naval vessels from freely sailing the waterways of the world." Trump also warned Iran to stop backing the Houthis, writing, "Beware, because America will hold you fully accountable, and we won't be nice about it." U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says America is doing the world a favor.
What we can't ignore, and the reason why the president mentioned Iran, is because the Iranians have supported the Houthis. They've provided them intelligence, they've provided them guidance, they've provided them weaponry.
The Iranians are defiant, claiming the U.S. and its allies are panicking in the face of Muslim nations standing together. The Houthis warned they will retaliate and claim to launch drone and ballistic missile attacks against a U.S. carrier in the region, but the Navy denies the attack and said they did not come near any U.S. ships. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
The attacks lit up the night sky over Gaza with dozens of explosions. Israel says it's killed a number of Hamas leaders. Hamas claims hundreds of Gazans have been killed and wounded. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave the order overnight, stating the aim is to achieve the war's objectives, including the release of all of our hostages, both the living and the fallen. The cabinet approved the decision after Hamas repeatedly refused to release the hostages and rejected proposals presented by President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and other mediators.
What we have seen them do is prepare for a terror attack against our troops in Gaza, but more importantly, against our civilians in the communities outside of Gaza and the Western Negev. What we did is we took a preemptive strike on those terrorists, specifically those commanders, and on terror targets, removing those threats, and basically saying we will not accept this.
President Trump was informed of the plan beforehand.
The Trump administration and the White House were consulted by the Israelis on their attacks in Gaza tonight. And as President Trump has made it clear, Hamas, the Houthis, Iran, all those who seek to terrorize not just Israel, but also the United States of America, will see a price to pay.
Israel's new chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, oversaw the operations alongside the head of the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar. Earlier in the week, Netanyahu announced he plans to fire Bar, the head of the nation's most powerful intelligence agency, over internal disagreements. That would be unprecedented in Israel's history. The attacks now dramatically change the situation between Israel and Hamas after several weeks of ceasefire and negotiations. The two sides' bottom line demands are contradictory. Israel insists the war can't permanently end till Hamas frees the hostages, disarms, and gives up governing Gaza. Hamas refuses to lay its arms and give up power. It says it won't release the hostages till Israel ends the war and withdraws its troops. Hamas is now issuing threats against the captives, saying in a statement that ending the ceasefire is, quote, exposing the hostages in Gaza to an unknown fate. However, the hostages are Hamas's only real bargaining chip, and if they're all killed, there'll be nothing left to keep the IDF from going all out to destroy the terror group. All this comes as the U.S. continues strikes at Houthi targets in Yemen to end their attacks on shipping in the region.
Today, the operation continues, and it will continue in the coming days until we achieve the president's objectives.
President Trump is now giving Iran, the Houthis' main sponsor, a tough warning. He posted on Truth Social, every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot being fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran. And Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences, and those consequences will be dire. Coming up, more from IDF spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani about the war in Gaza. Okay, Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us about the operation that began last night?
Well, as we have been in this situation since October 7th, fighting this terror organization, genocidal terror organization, we've been in this situation for a few weeks where there have been attempts at negotiation to release the hostages, and Hamas has showed no interest in releasing those 59 Israeli hostages, innocent civilians in Gaza. What we had yesterday was an aerial campaign, and aerial strikes against specific intelligence-based targets. And moving forward, all options are on the table. We are committed to the goals of the war, which are twofold. One is to return those 59 hostages. The other one is to dismantle Hamas and make sure they can never carry out another October 7th. And all options are on the table. We have a plan. We are acting according to the directive of our governments and according to the situational assessment. And I won't give hints to our enemies, but I'll tell you this, all options are on the table, including ground operations.
Yeah. What goals have been accomplished so far in the last 12 to 24 hours?
Well, we've been able to hit dozens of targets. Most of them are either commanders or terror targets, terror infrastructure that could be used for terror attacks. And we are assessing the situation right now, the morning after, understanding the results of our attacks, trying to get the BDA, the bomb damage assessments of how successful our attacks were. But we believe we were able to hit a blow on Hamas and prevent them from moving forward with their ideas to carry out a terror attack against our civilians.
So if I understand right, the operation has just not completely over, but it is in a pause right now?
Well, we had maybe more condensed and multiple strikes during the night, but we are still operating against Hamas. For two reasons. We have two goals, and those two goals are not happening, and we have to act to make sure they happen. The hostages are not being released. This is not an actual ceasefire if our hostages are not being released. And Hamas is trying to rearm and regroup and plan terror attacks against us. So we have to act against us. We have to act to change this reality where Hamas is trying to take us back to pre-October 7th, where they are posing a real threat on our civilians on our doorstep. That's what we're doing.
And what about the fate of the hostages? Hamas is warning right now they have an uncertain fate because of this attack.
Well, Hamas has been holding hostages for about a year and a half. Those hostages are Israeli civilians held in inhumane horrible conditions. And, we've been operating this whole war. I returned to service for them. Many of my brothers in arms have risked their lives. Some have paid with their lives to bring back those hostages. This is why we're operating in Gaza. That's one of the main reasons. And, Hamas has been playing mind games and psychological warfare against Israelis, and more specifically against the families of those hostages, trying to spread misinformation. And I really just encourage the public to take everything they say with a salt of grain and be careful spreading rumors about that. I can assure you the IDF is operating to return hostages. We're doing everything in our way to make sure we're operating against those terrorists, not against civilians, not against Palestinians, but also not against our hostages. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add, Nadav, and anything particular you need an American audience would need to know? Well, this war started with Hamas's brutal attack on October 7th. They sacrificed Gaza. They sacrificed their people. And the horrible thing is, just a few weeks ago, they said they're celebrating it and they're preparing to do it again if they can. And our mission is to make sure they can never do it again. This is a real threat on our doorstep. This is a real threat that if we don't act against, will come and kill our civilians. And this is an existential war for us. This is a war we must conduct and must win. And I think the world needs to understand who Hamas is, what they did. Never forget what they did, but also understand they plan on doing it again. They have not changed their ways, and we are committed to learn from our mistakes and make sure they don't have a chance to do that ever again.
Mm-hmm. Lieutenant Colonel Shoshani, thanks for joining us. Still ahead, a new organization seeking renewed emphasis on Zionism, Judaism, and democracy. Reserve Brigadier General Danny Van Buren is a man with a mission to call Israelis to a renewed commitment to values that played a role in the founding of modern Israel. His new organization is one whose time has come, or so we told our Middle East correspondent, Julie Stahl.
So now you've just recently founded an organization, Call to the Flag, or Call of Duty.
Yeah.
What is that all about? What is the Call of Duty?
I think what we have witnessed here in Israel, and I think it goes the same goes in the US, is the fact that there is a major collision between progressive values and conservative values. Mm-hmm. And it was reflected here in Israel, I think around 2 years ago, since this current government came to power, in the conflict over the judicial reform. And I think the question was not really the question of judicial reform. The question was the collision between these two values. And I think from one hand, you see people who support only individual rights, and and they are dismantling the core values of the Israeli society, whether it will be the religion or the nation or the flag, or hence the name, by the way, mm-hmm. Or the even families. And on the other side, you see people who are dedicated to keep the patriotic duties, the core values of Israel, which is based on both Zionism, Judaism, and democracy. Mm-hmm. So I think this is the collision, and we felt like there is a huge danger to the very existence of the Israeli society in terms of this collision.
So now the progressive cause was very, very vocal, even before the war, huge protests and everything. Conservatives weren't so vocal. How much of society would you say is more conservative rather than progressive?
I think when you dig inside, the most of it, the most of people are value, each one in their own perspective, in a way of thinking, or the way they implement the orthodox values or otherwise. But the fact is that the minority has control over most of the media, of the academia here in Israel.
So how is your organization going to combat this? What are your goals? What do you want to do?
First of all, the way that we allow ourselves to speak, both in television, in radio, in newspapers, creates some kind of a barrier for people that try to manipulate and to rule the way the things are presented here in Israel. And I think it's the first time where people who are conservatives are able to, there is a new channel here in Israel that is conservative, and there is a change in the air that if you try to express these kinds of ideas, mm-hmm. 3 or 4 years ago, you'll be considered, a fascist or otherwise.
Now, is there a way that also, like, the Muslim part of the population, the Christian part of the population works together with this?
I think so, because if you look at the Muslim community in Israel, I think this is the only place on earth where Muslims can exercise real democracy, or can witness mm-hmm. or live in democracy. And I think this is a good motivation for all of us to work together, because we if you believe in the state of Israel as a democracy and as a place that allows people to exercise their own belief, then you have to support the way the Israel has to exist, and this is by maintaining its basic Judaism, the identity, and the Zionism, and this doesn't oppose Christians or Muslims. This can work together.
Yeah, and we've seen that even with the Druze community, how much they really are glad to be part of Israel.
Yeah, they are patriotic.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Danny Van Buren, for joining us, and B'Hatzlacha, success to you.
Thank you.
Up next, Christian leaders standing together for Israel. Updates from Mario Bramnick and Cindy Jacobs. Proverbs 18:24 says, "There is a friend that sticks closer than a brother." Some Christian leaders came to Israel recently to demonstrate that kind of friendship. They also had a meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Pastor Mario Bramnick filled us in.
We came to Israel for various things, but the most important thing is it was our Israel launch of our new organization that we established in September called the Conference of Christian Presidents for Israel. It's a coalition of different presidents of Christian organizations and influential Christians in the United States to unite together, to be able to work together on pro-Israel policy, on strengthening U.S.-Israel relations, on an executive level, legislative state level, as well as mobilization of any grassroots when necessary.
I know you also met with Israeli leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Tell us about that meeting.
It was great. It's always an honor to meet with the Prime Minister. First, we weren't sure if we'd be able to meet with him because of him having to be all day in court with those cases, those unmerited cases, 2 to 3 times a week. But one evening after he was in court, he did meet with us, was very, very gracious. We spoke about our launch of the Conference of Christian Presidents, and we had a lot of things on our minds, a lot of different policies that we felt were very important, and I was wise. Instead of speaking, I said, "Mr. Prime Minister, what can we do to help you in Israel?" And he said, "You need to do whatever you can to help the Christians that are suffering in Syria."
Wow.
And just imagine, with all that's on Israel's plate, all the different fronts, the internal battles, et cetera, that was primarily what was on his heart and how we can help.
Tell us also about, you talked about Judea and Samaria.
Yes, we did visit Ariel. We were with Heather Johnson, who works very extensively on her initiative in Israel.
It also seems to be a very critical time because President Trump has announced he'll be making a decision about Judea and Samaria. Is this a very timely moment for the future of what some people call the West Bank?
Certainly, there are a lot of things happening right now. We've got the issue in Gaza. We've got the Israel having to complete all of the war goals of getting all the hostages out and completely dismantling Hamas. Other issues that Israel is tracking right now is how our United States deep state is working and has been working, the Biden administration, with Israel's deep state to unseat Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Tell us about the final thoughts you have about this new organization you've just inaugurated here in Israel.
Well, we're very excited. The Prime Minister, the leadership that we met with, Jewish leadership back home, as well as the Christian world. There's many, many great organizations in support of Israel doing great work. And we think that as we coalesce as one, we'll have a greater voice, greater impact on strengthening the U.S.-Israel relations, on blessing Israel, on combating anti-Semitism. So we're very excited about what God's doing and the potential of this organization.
All right, Mario Bramnick, thanks for joining us on Jerusalem Dateline. Swift changes in Israel and the Middle East are taking the world by surprise, but not everyone. Cindy Jacobs from Generals International has a sense that a major reset is underway and part of a divine plan. Here's our recent conversation. Tell me what the Lord is sharing with you.
We know that Israel is God's timetable, really the clock of the world. And so I think that what the Holy Spirit wants to do is give a reset to Israel and Gaza. And everybody thinks that can't happen. I mean, in the natural, it just looks impossible. But God's got a plan. God's got a plan for the Middle East and to bring a move of God like we cannot imagine. But of course, Satan always wants to, throw a monkey wrench in there. But I think even what's happening in Syria is remarkable, although we're concerned, about some aspects of it. But the whole biblical world, God is going to do a great work in it. And he's also readjusting. Yeah. I mean, I prophesied while you were there at the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast in Mar-a-Lago that they would actually call some people say the West Bank, they would say Judea and Samaria again. Yeah. It's going to be on the maps, Judea, Samaria, in the natural, we don't know, but it will be. And again, it's God adjusting the world. We don't understand this, but it's very important for us to have a reformation back to biblical language. That's biblical language, is Judea and Samaria. And so I really feel when that happens, that's also going to be a sign what he's going to do in the whole Middle East.
So do we see the rise and fall of kingdoms in the Middle East? We see Syria has fallen. We expect, many people do, that Iran might fall. But we see a rise of Turkey as well.
Yes, well, Turkey is our big concern right now, even in Syria. That's true. But Turkey also has biblical significance. So the Holy Spirit, and I'll just prophesy that God's going to do a work in Turkey that's going to surprise some people, even around the Ephesus area. What is it? I'm trying to remember, Izmir or whatever like that. And in the 7 cities.
Of Revelation?
Of Revelation. Yeah, God is readjusting to biblical language. God is readjusting to biblical sites. And a lot of people are just going to be shocked. I know Turkey looks gone in a way. We love Turkey, and the Turkish people, but God's got a plan. Yeah, he's so smart, He's in for the long game. Who knew? He's in for the long game, And so I think even, from your perch there in Jerusalem, that is even so prophetic and so significant. But just watch and see. You're going to be able, and this is the first time I prophesied this, you're going to see that God's doing adjustments, that he's saying, okay, this was my plan for Turkey. I had those 7 churches. I had, this for near Ephesus. I had this for Damascus. And you're going to start seeing, although I know in Syria there's persecution of Christians right now. I pray for them, I also pray for Gaza, the people of them, even though there's a lot of challenge there. Egypt, Jordan, I've been concerned about Jordan. But this is what the Holy Spirit is saying. Look, there are wells that are there. And I'm going to activate those wells. I'm going to activate biblical wells, and people will say it's impossible, it can never happen, but it's going to happen.
Speaking of reclaiming a biblical heritage, Jerusalem's celebration of Purim this year was especially meaningful. As Israel fights for its existence, the story of Queen Esther toppling evil forces resonated with all Israelis. Thousands participated with gusto, like an act of defiance that said, "We're still here." Take a look. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. And please keep praying for the protection of IDF soldiers and all those caught in harm's way, and for the safe return of all the hostages. We'll leave you with a few verses from Psalm 91, verses 14 through 16. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call on me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him with a long life. I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. I'm Chris Mitchell. For all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.